Let's see. Jake Sorticus, that's a new name, I think, or at least I haven't seen too much of it. Who's more effective in pulling centrist, wavering political minds to the conservative right? Comedians like Owen Benjamin, Steven Crowder, or political powerhouses like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin? I think the answer, Jake, when it comes to the question of which is more effective, is it intelligence or is it humor? So I think the answer to your question is the most effective member at pulling people over from the left is me, because I've got the best combination of both of those things. Weren't really ready for that, were you? Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of a bitch. I know that was a very bizarre answer, but it occurred to me in a way of actual genuine humility that I do think I'm way underexposed, given the fact that humor is really powerful, and information and the ability to put down a barrage of facts is very powerful. But if you have nothing but comedy, it's easy to dismiss. And if you have nothing but data, it's also easy to dismiss. And the trick is finding a way to stake the information into the emotional ground with little pegs of humor. So and virtually everything I do in terms of humor is spontaneous. I certainly don't sit and pre-write any of these jokes, although I'm certainly not above reusing things that I've come up with spontaneously, but usually it's just something that just comes out of my mouth. And parenthetically, at the breakout session on TPUSA, we did another one of those situations where I have conservative students ask me the questions that they get asked by their progressive betters, and I say, ask me in the same condescending, sneering, awful tone that you use. And somebody asked me a particularly offensive question, something along the lines of, how can a white person possibly connect to the state of black America? And I looked at this person and I said, that is the most disgusting and obnoxious question I've ever heard. Have you ever in your life been out on a second date? Ever once? I was rather proud of that. But the one that I was really proud of was this. I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for people, and somebody asked me the question, and I stop the clock and I say, okay, I'm going to answer in 1 minute, in 60 seconds. But before we do that, let's see what the question's really about, because I like breaking down the everything that the left says and does, all of their policies, all of their questions, all of their criticisms come down to, when you get right down to it, they all operate off the same principle, and the principle is, how is what I'm saying as a leftist make me a better person than you? How can I elevate myself above you morally, intellectually, or both? And once you understand that's the objective, is simply to show that they're better people than other people, which comes from a lack of self-esteem. But when you understand that, then you can decode everything. Then then you've got the Rosetta Stone. Now you know how to translate the question. And once you understand where that's coming from, it's really useful. But in any event, speaking of thinking on your feet, and humor, somebody said, okay, well, what do you have to say about the crime of cultural appropriation? And I said, kind of interesting that we're having this discussion in English, isn't it? And the room just exploded. I mean, it just exploded. And I was about to go on and finally learn my lesson and say, sometimes it's best just to shut up after that. And yeah, that is the way you defeat the left. Not with a whole, well, no. What do you mean cultural? We're having this conversation in English. You've appropriated my language to ask me a question about cultural appropriation in. It's over when that happens. It's over. So those are the kind of things we should be doing, I think. And that's where humor can really be your friend. It can really, even people who don't like you, if you can make them laugh, it's astonishing to watch. What was that example? I'm trying to remember what the question was. It was something, it was at Cal Poly, I remember that, out in San Luis Obispo, and some guy was really not a big fan of mine, and he was, talking about this or that. I said something, we're talking about staff or faculty members or something, an engineering department at school or something. I said, look, one thing we can agree on, right, is that engineers are not exactly the most well-dressed and charming people that ever lived. And this guy was an engineering major. He just burst out laughing, and after that, he was a different guy. So I think it's both, Jake. I really do. I'm trying to think of who else does this very well. I know there's one or two people that I've heard that just really... Nobody strikes me as having that same balance. Wish I hadn't had that question and the same question when I talk about my overweening pride, but I have to tell you, that's my honest answer. I really think it's... I think if that's a Venn diagram, I don't think they're separate camps. I think they overlap, and some people are almost all data and almost no humor, and some people are almost all humor, almost no data, and I think I'm right in the middle, which is right where I'd like to be. So there you go.